Welcome to Discover Truth. My name is garethgw, and today we're just going to carry on in the life story of Esther. You can read her story in the Bible in the Old Testament, in the book which has her name, the book of Esther. Today we're into the penultimate part of her life story, part number 4. So we're making our way towards the conclusion here today. And what we're going to discover today is it's a foolish thing to stand against the plans of God. It's better to obey. It's right to obey because sin will always be punished. And we're going to be discovering that as we think about it in today's lesson. The queen was ready to make her way into the throne room of the king. There she was in her royal robes, a crown upon her head, and she took a deep breath. You see, she knew that she hadn't been into the king for over 30 days. And there was a law in the land at that time where unless the king had invited you to come to his palace, if you came in unannounced and unwelcomed, you could be taken away and sentenced to death. That was a law that he had made. But the queen knew that she might die this day, but there was still that death threat hanging over the whole of the nation of Israel because Haman had made and written that wicked law that all the Jewish people were going to be put to death on the 13th day of the 12th month, and she needed to intervene. She had to do something. So with boldness and courage, she walked through the gate into the palace. King Ahasuerus, he reached out and grabbed his golden scepter. He lifted it to the air and he stretched it towards Queen Esther. He beckoned her to come forward. I'm sure she breathed a sigh of relief. But for her, this wasn't her opportunity. The king, he had said to her, "What is it you want me to do for you? I will give you anything up to half of my kingdom." But the queen thought to herself, "I want you and Haman to come to a banquet that I'm putting on just for the two of you this afternoon." The king, he was in agreement, and she said, "At the banquet, I tell you what it is that I request." That afternoon came, and there the three of them were, sitting around the table with all manner of food and drink. They ate and drank until they were filled, and what a good and wonderful day that was, Haman thought. The king once again said to his queen, "So what is it you want me to do for you? I'll give you anything, up till half of my kingdom." But the queen said to King Ahasuerus, "Will you come to another banquet tomorrow afternoon? And at that banquet, then I tell you what's upon my heart." And the king, he agreed. Haman's heart was so swelled with pride. He was so excited as he was leaving the palace that day. He thought to himself, "I am so wonderful and amazing. I am so special. Today I have had a banquet with the king and queen, and I've been invited to another banquet again tomorrow. I mean, I am so wonderful. I am so special. I'm the second most powerful man in this kingdom. Things are great for me." His heart was swelled and filled with pride. He was full of arrogance. He thought there was no one quite like him. And maybe sometimes you're a little bit like Haman. Maybe there are times whenever you're going on a school trip, maybe you're heading to the swimming pool, and you want to be on the school bus first of all so you can get the best seats at the back. You want to be first. Maybe in school sports day, maybe you want to race, and maybe you like to gloat about that and tell everyone how wonderful you are at winning the medal and coming first. Maybe you're the person who gets picked for the football team or the rugby team in school, and you think that you're wonderful because you have been chosen, and your heart gets filled with pride, and you like to take pride in that, and you like to tell people about that and make people feel lesser than you because they're not as good as you. The Bible tells me that pride is a sin. God tells us in His Word that we should put other people before ourselves and think of more people as important than ourselves. We should love other people and be kind and compassionate to other people. And pride isn't a good thing to have in our hearts. That's an example of sin. And sin is against God, and therefore we shouldn't live our lives like that. Haman's heart was filled with pride. All he could think about was me, me, me. As he was leaving the palace, he thought he was great until he walked past Mordecai. Mordecai, who always refused to bow down to him. Mordecai, who just seemed to make his life a nightmare. And it was Mordecai who seemed to zap all the joy out of Haman's life. Haman couldn't help but think to himself, "I can't wait until Mordecai's out of here. I can't wait until he's dead. I hate him so, so much." That's what he was thinking. Whenever he returned back to his house, he met with his wife and some of his family and some of his friends had called round, and there he was still reminiscing about how wonderful his day was, and how important and how special a man that he happened to be, not only going to one banquet, but being invited to a second. He was talking about how great his family was and how great his sons are, how much money he has in the bank and how great a job that he has. But yet, knowing that Mordecai there at the gate who wouldn't bow to him, that just seemed to spoil his day and ruin his life. And as he was talking with his family, they entered into a really strange, weird conversation. His family started to say to him, "Look, why don't you go into the king early tomorrow morning? Make up a reason for Mordecai to be taken away and to be executed, have him put to death. And then that way you can go to the banquet tomorrow afternoon with the king and queen and you can enjoy it. You can enjoy that time together." And somehow, Haman seemed to think that this was a good plan, this was a good idea. So he put a plan into effect. He organized some men to build a gallows, which is a big structure where someone would be hanged by the neck until they were dead. He planned his gallows to be used for Mordecai the following morning. And then off Haman went to bed and put his head down and fell fast asleep. But on that particular night, King Ahasuerus, he couldn't sleep. God had taken his sleep from him. And Ahasuerus, he asked one of his servants to come and to read to him from the history books from the kingdom. Maybe he thought to himself, if he had some of the history read to him, maybe that would be enough to put him off to sleep. His servant, he opened up the books and began to read to him about Mordecai, who worked in the city gate, and how he uncovered a plot that was to assassinate the king. It was Mordecai who sent word into the palace and who was able to make it so that the king was rescued and that he survived that. The king asked, "What was done for this man Mordecai? I mean, how was this man honoured for saving my life?" As his servant read on, he said, "Nothing was done for this man. No, not that I can see, not that I can read." At that very moment, there was a noise at the door. It was Haman. He had got up early in the morning to come and make that evil request of the king to have Mordecai put to death. You see, God, he works all things together for our good. To those who love God, God is in control of all things, of all situations, of all circumstances. It was God who put the queen into the palace. It was God who caused Mordecai to have the job and overhear about the assassination attempt. It was God who took away the king's sleep at this particular night. It was God who organized that the servant was going to read from the history books exactly where he read as he talked about Mordecai and how he saved the king's life. It was God who had organized everything and all the details to this moment. But now Haman had come into the room, and the king said to Haman, "Haman, what should be done to the man whom the king wants to honor?" Obviously, Haman thought to himself, "Who else would the king want to honor except for me? This has got to be about me." You see, he was so filled with pride, he thought that there was nobody any more important than him. He thought that the king wanted to do more good things for him. And sometimes, maybe that's also the way that you think. Maybe you think that you just want more and more and more. Whenever it comes to your birthday and the presents that you receive, it's just not enough. Whenever you go to the shops, you expect your parents always to buy you something. You expect to have the best of everything, the newest phone, the latest clothes. You just want to have everything for yourself. You see, that's what pride looks like. Whenever you're so filled with your own self-importance that nobody else and nothing else matters except for you and your happiness. It's a terrible thing to have a heart which is filled with pride and have no care or concern for anybody else and be so filled with your own self-importance. That's what it was like for Haman. He thought to himself, who else could the king possibly be talking about except for me? So he began to say to the king, "So you're asking me what should be done for the man whom the king wants to honor? Well, I would suggest that you get your robe and put it on his back. Get your ring and put it on his finger, and bring out one of your horses and put him on the horseback. Have one of your men lead that man throughout the city and have him shout out at the top of his voice, "Here's what's done to the man who the king wants to honour." The king thought about this request for a little second or two, and he thought, "Yes, Haman, that's a good idea. Everything that you have said, go and do that for Mordecai." The whole bottom must have emptied out of Haman's world. What? Do it for Mordecai? He was thinking, surely the king wants this done for me. How foolish it is to stand against the paths and the plans of God. You see, as a sinner, with sin in your life, you're going your own way. You're going against God and against His will, against His wishes. And it's your sin that will keep you out of heaven. But John chapter 3 and verse 16 says, "For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in Him should not perish but have everlasting life." You see, whenever Jesus was dying on the cross, He had you on His mind. He was taking the punishment for the sin of the world upon Himself in His own body. He has made a way of salvation, a way of forgiveness, a way for you to have your sins forgiven. Haman too could have been forgiven if only he would have confessed his sin to God and acknowledged that he was doing wrong and asked and seek for forgiveness. But instead he was so filled with his own self-importance, he had no time for God, and he didn't even think about him. How humiliating it must have been for Haman that day, as he was walking through the city with Mordecai on the back of the king's horse with the king's robes on, while he was crying out, "Here's what's done for the man whom the king wants to honour." Haman started to realize things weren't really going his way. Eventually, later on that morning, he made his way back to his own home, spent some time chatting and talking to his family, and his family were saying to him, "Haman, you've got to be careful here, because if Mordecai is a Jew, if he's one of God's people, then you'll have no power against him. When you face him, you will be defeated, you will be destroyed." I wonder were these things rattling around in the mind of Haman? Was he thinking about how his life was now getting turned upside down? How things weren't working out exactly the way that he had planned or the way that he had thought? But just at that moment, there was a knock on the door. "Haman, you've been summoned. You've been summoned to the palace for a banquet." Everything had to stop. And Haman was making his way back to the palace, unknown to him, for the very last time.